Shalom. Welcome to Center of Gravity. I'm Rabbi Eric Yanoff. I've been the rabbi of a beautiful congregation of people, of seekers across viewpoints and spectrums and approaches to Judaism and different Jewish backgrounds at a synagogue called Adath, Israel, just outside of Philadelphia. One of the things I've learned in my time that I've been blessed to be the rabbi of Adath, Israel, is that we need to have a conversation that attempts to bring in all of those different types of people and viewpoints. And I have found myself part of a conversation, maybe it's a quiet conversation, in a society that is increasingly polarized, whose views find themselves camped out at one extreme or the other. I found myself having the quiet conversation from the viewpoint of the center. That's why we're entitling this new podcast, Center of Gravity. We're hoping that we will certainly reach people who are part of the Adath Israel community, maybe reach beyond that to people connected to those in the Adath Israel community. And I hope that our conversations will reach beyond that as well, wherever people may find themselves seeking a quieter, nuanced conversation that can only be attained, I believe, by positioning ourselves in the center. You see, in our society nowadays, it feels that people are either on one extreme or the other and only moving further out. This is true politically. It's true religiously. It's true in the way that we gather in person, online, in social media. We tend to be in echo chambers that are self-affirming, but also in some ways extremizing because they lead us deeper down one viewpoint. And I found myself, one person once gave me the tagline or the nickname of a fanatic centrist. He said, my gosh, you're so much in the center, and that's so rare. And it's not because I'm looking at the one side and saying, well, maybe that, and the other side and saying, well, maybe that. It's because there is a principled stance of positioning ourselves where we can hear as far as possible from both of the poles. Certainly, as things go further out to the extreme, we find ourselves hearing things with which we may not agree, even things which we may find distasteful or harmful and damaging. But it's from the center where we can best hear more perspectives. It's from the center where we can hope to learn from the diversity of viewpoints, not that we'll agree, but that we can, in an almost composite sketch, amalgamate a closer sense of truth and diversity that is, I believe, very much a part of what it means to be a learner and what it means to be a Jew. These books behind me, many of them are part of the conversation of a diversity of viewpoints. The Talmud, the Midrash, centuries upon centuries of conversations where rabbis and other thinkers vehemently disagreed with one another, sometimes not so nicely disagreed with one another. I have records here of rabbis saying, you must not have a brain cell in your head if you hold that. And yet, the overlap, the Venn diagram of what they believed that bound them together was so much stronger than that which tore them apart. Because at the core, at the center, they took with great gravitas the idea that we had a message for the world, a redemptive message that could help to build a better world, that could help to provide comfort to those who were doubting whether that better world was possible, were uncertain and feeling vulnerable. There's a concern nowadays that maybe that center position is thinning, kind of like a putty being stretched to either side and thinning in the middle with the danger that it may well break. But I believe that we have not only an opportunity in the center, but a moral imperative to be the glue for a society that threatens to pull itself apart, whose people on the extremes are almost giddy about the idea of delegitimizing, vilifying people farthest from them. The center is what allows us to have a maximally broad tent of connectivity between diverse views that maybe could help one another. And I believe that there are a lot of people out there who are quietly doubting the directionality of our society, saying, well, on that side over there, that pole over there, I know that's not me. And over there, that's definitely not me. And then asking, so where am I? Where do I belong? What is the voice that allows me to find commonality, enter into non-threatening and eye-opening and mind-opening conversation? Where is the nuanced voice that can hold diverse viewpoints instead of shouting from a distance of one pole to the other? I believe that people are really shouting at one another across a gap, feeling very affirmed by the people in their own polarized midst, feeling self-assured, and allowing themselves to forget the rest of a thought spectrum. I'm asking myself, where is the nuanced voice that is cognizant of what is out there in the ideas on either sides of us? Not that I'm necessarily going to agree with things on either side. In fact, it's at the center where we sit in great discomfort when we are exposed to ideas that we know are not in agreement with where we stand. I live this life not only ideologically in terms of where I situate myself in my personal views, but I live it professionally. I'm part of a movement of Judaism called conservative Judaism. It is not an aptly named movement. Conservative Judaism is, in a sense, at the very center of the spectrum of Jewish approaches to theology, to the Torah text, to the way in which we embrace the world as it modernizes, while also holding on with great awe to the sacred tradition from whence we come. As I said, it's a misleading name. It came from an historical moment in the late 19th century when there was a movement connected to the Enlightenment of reforming Judaism, making Judaism more compatible to fit into a world that was secularizing and modernizing at a significant pace. The early reform movement were asking questions, maybe we shouldn't face Jerusalem when we pray. And even in its most extreme case, the reformers of Judaism at that era were asking, maybe we would fit in better if we had our Sabbath, Shabbat, on Sunday. They were eschewing some of the more ritualized aspects of Judaism that felt provincial and ritualistic. Counter to that was a movement that then became calling itself Orthodoxy, which was this idea that, no, we had to hold firm on tradition. And then there were these people who heard the reformers and had found great intellectual inspiration and comfort and wisdom in the world around them, and had put much more than a toe into that world and really had immersed in and lived in two worlds, but were concerned that when it came to their Jewish souls, that the reformers were going too far, throwing out the proverbial baby with the bathwater. And so those people in the center knew that the modern world had what to teach us, and the ancient Jewish wisdom was something that we could not throw away cavalierly. And so they sought to conserve part of that tradition in a way that would allow us to live not comfortably, certainly in tension, but with that tension, with great authenticity in multiple worlds, with multiple schools of wisdom and viewpoint. Those who sought to conserve the tradition while learning from an ever-accelerating modernity, they became known as conservative Jews. They were, in fact, always in the middle of the religious and political and social spectrum. That's the movement of Judaism in which I grew up. seeking a middle path that learned from multiple sources of wisdom. The middle path, actually, in the intellectual history of Judaism, is what Maimonides in the early Middle Ages called the ideal path. He took it from Aristotle of ancient times, saying that the golden mean was the path to true wisdom and virtue. In the conservative movement, in this Judaism, where I gained my worldview in many ways, we seek a maximally large tent, knowing that in such a large tent, we are going to be stretched by the ideas around us. We are asking to hear and be heard through multiple lenses of wisdom. And in that moment, and in that approach to Judaism, I also gained a worldview. The belief that while there are certainly very distasteful, even damaging, and even, yes, evil ideas that often inhabit the extremes, that can be argued ad absurdum to a point when we are in that echo chamber. Not all ideas are okay, but from the center, we expose ourselves to more ideas. And maybe we find a kernel of wisdom here and a kernel of wisdom here, and even a kernel of hard truth out further close to the extreme. And when we bring that in and amalgamate that and coalesce that together, we get a truth that tends to be more respectful, tends to be more worldly, tends to have multiple streams and data points in it, tends to be more nuanced, tends to be more careful and thoughtful of others. It tends to be more thoughtful of others because we're hearing others, not just those like us. We're allowing ourselves to say, I may disagree with that profoundly, but just because I think something is wrong does not mean I think that it is inherently evil. It allows us to take a posture of curiosity. Those who are uncomfortable with such a centrist approach find themselves really self-affirmed with only one or very few sources of wisdom. This challenges me. I'll tell a brief story about this. I was once, several years ago, teaching a class for a local Jewish school. The class was called Denominational Differences, and it involved a Reform, a conservative, and an Orthodox rabbi, all teaching our approach to different aspects of Judaism, to how we connected to Israel, to how we observed Shabbat and holidays, to other laws, other Jewish practices, to what it would look like to walk into one of our synagogues or other Jewish institutions. So the three of us would each teach the class from our perspective, and then once every week or two, we would have this panel, this summit coming together. That part sounds like the beginning of a joke, like a Reform, a conservative, and Orthodox rabbi all walk into a classroom. Anyway, we would do this for weeks upon weeks on end, and the students would come prepared with questions to ask all three of us from the individual conversations that we had had with them on our individual days from our own perspectives. Conversation went on appropriately. I was sitting in the middle of the three-person panel. And at some point in time, it got heated enough that the Reform rabbi sort of leaned in front of me to the Orthodox rabbi who was on my other side and said, if we continue at this, if we continue to diverge in our paths and approaches to Judaism, pretty soon we're going to have two different Judaisms, two different religions. At which point, I put my arms around both of them. I pulled them tight in with a hug, and I said, not if I can help it. Not if I can help it. In some ways, I view my role as the one that is the glue, what it means to be in the center, the hinge, the linchpin of what we call Klal Yisrael, the wholeness of the people of Israel. When we use in Hebrew the phrase Am Echad, that we are one people, it means that some group needs to make sure that the Jewish society, and by the way, it's happening in society out there at large, to make sure that society does not splinter out from under itself. This is not moral relativism being in the center. This is a principled stance that says, yes, we can learn and be challenged by all that we hear from all sides. And at the end of the day, that is the only thing that allows us to be cautious for those ideas that are extreme and dangerous. From the center, we are almost always a little bit uncomfortable because we're always stretching ourselves. We're pushing ourselves to believe that there is wisdom on the left and on the right. Because in a really divided society of 49% to 51% or something like this, I refuse to believe that either 49 or 51% of the people with whom I disagree are bad, are evil. On those extremes, we may find conclusions that are dangerous or damaging to society. And also, from the center, we can stretch ourselves to hold as much of the ideas in society, as many of the elements of that society and the people and the sub-communities of that society that are willing to be held. This is the way we build respect for one another. This is the way we seek to learn from one another, a posture of curiosity as opposed to judgmentalism. From the center, when we take our calling, our purpose with gravity of tone, gravity of purpose, from the center, we can see farther across the spectrum of Jewish experience, of societal diversity. While my area of learning certainly views the world through a Jewish lens, I believe that this approach can help us learn about the world at large. That's what I took it to mean when that friend of mine shook his head and called me that fanatic centrist, that it is a principled stance. So here we are. We're in the center, and a center that we are treating with gravity. We are the center of gravity. We are going to, with great thought and consideration, hear from those polls, finding some of it distasteful, but seeking meaning and sanity and nuance and a heterogeneity of thought so that we won't be monolithic. And yes, in that way, we'll have a conversation with greater gravitas than we could have if we were only self-affirming in one area along the spectrum of thought. We are at an inflection point in our society and, in a parallel sense, in Jewish society as well. We are asking questions as a society, questions like, what does it mean to join a community, a group, a cause, an effort? What does it mean to join a community, group, cause, or effort when we don't 100% overlap with all of the viewpoints and approaches of that group? Should we hold on to our individualism, or is there a greater good in joining? We're asking questions in Judaism about what it means to be chosen, but also beyond that, in society at large, what it means to be called to a path, to a purpose, not in an elitist way saying, I'm the only one who could do that, but asking, what is our role? Why we exist in this purpose, in this constellation of effort? In the Jewish community, we're asking questions about how we connect to the people, the land, and the state of Israel. For the first time in Jewish history, in perhaps 2,200 years, we're asking the question, what does it mean to be powerful as a Jewish people? And especially, how has that foisted divisions within the Jewish community? Real grave questions about what it means to also be vulnerable as a Jewish community and people, especially in a time we have power. These are questions that are asking us how to recognize and confront anti-Semitism. These are questions that are asking us what it means to have a strong, proud, and yet also humble and self-reflective identity as a religion and as a people. How do we hold a religious community together that also has a national and peoplehood identity? These are some of the conversations that we're having, both in the Jewish community and with parallels in society at large. These are the conversations we're going to have here on this podcast. We hope to be a window into real serious topics. Some of our times we'll take an opportunity to have a sermon talk back on an idea that I shared elsewhere, or that a colleague or friend of mine, Rabbi Markowitz here at Adath Israel, that we shared. What does it mean to maybe look under the hood and see how we came to that conversation? Sometimes we'll use this forum to test out ideas that maybe aren't yet fully baked enough to be a sermon or a writing, and we'll wrestle with them here to see where they go. We'll ask ourselves, what is our responsibility in the world to other people, even to other people who might spurn us as Jews? We'll ask questions about how we see beauty in the world, even in a time that is highly challenging in this inflection point in history. In recent times, I have used Billy Joel and questions of Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, and even questions of the SEPTA regional rail line and its importance for building a society, to allow ourselves to look through the lens of Jewish wisdom, 3,000 years of a beautiful tradition, to shed light on the world as we live it right now, with one foot dancing at two different wedding parties, with, as that's how the Yiddish saying goes, with multiple perspectives that we can only hear in all of their cadence and nuance and overtone when we position ourselves at a place that all of those voices come at us from their different perspectives, at a place in the center. I want to conclude this first introductory foray into podcasting with a confessional. This medium is a little uncomfortable for me. It's not natural. I have likened it in the past to throwing a ball over a fence and not knowing whether there was someone on the other side to catch it, or whether it just fell in a puddle, or whether it broke a window. On the other side of this podcast, that's you. I hope you'll catch this ball. I hope you'll throw it back. You'll give me feedback. We'll grow together in this conversation, because speaking from and learning from the center to as broad and diverse a community as we can reach, that is our mission. That is our calling. And that's what we hope to do here at Center of Gravity. Toda Rabbi, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to Center of Gravity. We are working to make this podcast as engaging and meaningful as we can, and so we need your help. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, thoughts, ideas for future podcasts, or any other ways that we can reach you, please email us at centerofgravity@adathisrael.org. Thanks so much for tuning in. Shalom.